Why are you doing this to your own mother? That thought, a silent scream, echoed in my mind. It was a crisp Saturday afternoon, October 14th, 2023, precisely 4:17 p.m. The air, thick with cloying lilies and expensive champagne, felt suffocating. I, Helen Miller, 69 years old, stood paralyzed. My heart hammered against my ribs. My navy blue silk dress, saved for years, felt like a lead blanket. The polished marble floor reflected dazzling chandeliers, mocking my plain shoes. Inside, I could hear muffled laughter and clinking glasses from the hundreds of guests I had paid for. Then, Michael appeared before me. His eyes, once warm, now cold and devoid of recognition. His new wife, Emily, stood behind him, her smile venomous. The scent of her expensive perfume felt like a slap. "Mom, what in God's name are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice laced with venom. "You're embarrassing us." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath. My legs went weak. A choked sob escaped my lips as I tried to meet his gaze, but there was nothing, just a wall of contempt. But what neither of them knew was that in just 72 hours, the carefully constructed facade of their perfect day and their perfect future would begin to crumble into dust. But before I continue, check if you're already subscribed to the channel and leave your like. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening to my story from? I really want to know how far it has reached. To understand that moment, that crushing rejection, you have to go back, way back, to a time when Michael was just a little boy, and our world was filled with laughter, simple joys, and an unbreakable bond. I was Helen Miller, a young woman in my late 20s, full of dreams and a fierce love for my only son. His father, David, was a kind, hard-working man, and together we built a life that, while not extravagant, was rich in affection and shared moments. We lived in a modest, two-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio, a place where the scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the aroma of my homemade apple pie on Sunday afternoons. Do you remember those days when life felt simpler, more predictable? Michael was born on a warm August morning in 1986, weighing a healthy 7 pounds, 12 ounces. From the moment I held him, I knew my life had changed forever. He was a bright, curious child, with a mop of sandy blonde hair and eyes that sparkled with mischief and intelligence. I remember one crisp autumn day, October 23rd, 1991, when Michael was 5. We were at the local pumpkin patch, the air smelling faintly of damp earth and hay. He insisted on carrying the largest pumpkin he could find, a monstrous gourd that was almost as big as he was. His little face was red with effort, his brow furrowed in concentration, but he wouldn't let me help. "I can do it, Mom," he declared, his voice a tiny, determined squeak. That day, we carved the pumpkin together, its sticky insides a mess on the kitchen table, but his laughter, bright and clear, was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. We spent nearly 3 hours on that single pumpkin, transforming it into a goofy, toothy grin. Another memory, vivid as if it happened yesterday, was his 8th birthday, May 15th, 1994. David and I had saved up for months to buy him a brand new bicycle, a shiny red BMX with knobby tires. We surprised him with it in our backyard, the morning sun glinting off the handlebars. His eyes widened, a gasp escaping his lips, and he threw his arms around us, squeezing us so tight I thought my ribs might crack. He spent the entire afternoon riding laps around our small yard, his face flushed with pure joy, the sound of his bell ringing echoing through the neighborhood. He must have ridden that bike for at least 40 miles that day, just around our property. We had spent $280 on that bike, a significant sum for us back then, but seeing his unadulterated happiness made every penny worth it. When Michael was 12, on a family vacation to the Outer Banks, North Carolina, in July of 1998, we built the most magnificent sandcastle I've ever seen. It had turrets, a moat, and even tiny seashell decorations. We spent nearly 6 hours under the scorching sun, our skin getting redder by the minute, but we didn't care. Michael was so proud, meticulously placing each shell, his small fingers covered in sand. The waves eventually claimed it, but the memory of his beaming face, covered in sand and salt, as he declared it the best castle ever, is etched in my heart. That trip cost us almost $1,500, a sum we'd saved for over a year, but the memories were priceless. I also vividly recall a chilly November evening in 2001 when Michael was 15. He was struggling with a complex algebra problem, frustrated and on the verge of giving up. I sat with him at our kitchen table, the scent of my simmering pot roast filling the air, and patiently walked him through each step. It took us nearly 2 hours, with me explaining the concepts in different ways, drawing diagrams, and even making up silly rhymes to help him remember formulas. When he finally understood it, a triumphant grin spread across his face, and he hugged me tight. "Thanks, Mom," he said, his voice soft. "You always know how to make things clear." That moment, that simple act of shared struggle and eventual success, solidified my belief in his potential and my role in nurturing it. I spent countless hours, probably over 100 in total throughout his school years, helping him with homework, attending school plays, and cheering him on at his soccer games, always making sure he knew he had my unwavering support. David passed away suddenly when Michael was 17, in March of 2004. It was a devastating blow. My world, our world, shattered into a million pieces. Michael, who had always been so vibrant, retreated into himself. I remember finding him one evening, sitting in his father's old armchair, clutching a worn baseball glove, tears silently streaming down his face. The house felt empty, the silence deafening. I knew then, more than ever, that I had to be strong for him, to be both mother and father. I put my own grief aside, burying it deep, to focus on his healing. I worked extra shifts at the local library, sometimes 50 hours a week, to make sure he had everything he needed, that his future wasn't compromised. I wanted him to have the opportunities David would have wanted for him. I poured every ounce of my being into ensuring his stability, his happiness. Was that a mistake? Did I give too much? After David's passing, my life became a relentless cycle of work and saving. I wasn't just working extra shifts at the library. I took on a second job, part-time, at a local bookstore, the Book Nook, working an additional 20 hours a week, sometimes until 10 p.m. on weeknights. My hands, once soft from homemaking, became calloused from shelving books and handling heavy boxes. I meticulously tracked every dollar, every cent. I cut back on all non-essential expenses. No more new clothes for myself, no more dining out. Even my beloved weekly coffee with Susan became a rare treat. I learned to stretch every grocery budget, becoming an expert at finding deals and cooking economical meals. My goal was singular, to ensure Michael's future was secure, that he wouldn't feel the pinch of our reduced circumstances. I managed to save an average of $800 a month from my combined income, diligently depositing it into a high-yield savings account. Over the course of those difficult years, from 2004 until Michael left for college in 2008, I managed to accumulate nearly $38,400, a testament to my unwavering dedication and sacrifice. This was on top of the initial $15,000 from David's life insurance that I had set aside for his education. Every single penny was for him, for his dreams, for the life I believed he deserved. I often wondered if anyone truly understood the depth of that sacrifice, the quiet, daily grind that became my existence. Michael eventually went off to college, a state university about 200 miles away. It was a proud moment, watching him drive off, his car packed with boxes, a mixture of excitement and apprehension on his face. I had saved diligently, putting away nearly $15,000 from David's life insurance and my own meager earnings to cover his first year's tuition and living expenses. I wanted him to focus on his studies, not on financial worries. He called me every Sunday, without fail, for the first few months. Those calls, brief as they often were my lifeline, a reminder of the strong connection we shared. He'd tell me about his classes, his new friends, the challenges he faced. I'd listen, offering advice, encouragement, and always my unwavering support. I sent him care packages filled with his favorite homemade cookies and little notes of encouragement, spending an average of $40 per package every 2 weeks. After college, Michael found a good job in marketing in a bustling city, about 500 miles from my quiet town. He was thriving, building a life for himself. He met Emily at a company event. She was beautiful, ambitious, and came from a wealthy family. I remember the first time he brought her home, about 3 years ago, in the summer of 2022. She was charming, if a little reserved, and I was just so happy to see Michael so happy. He seemed to glow in her presence. They talked about their future, their dreams, their plans for a big, beautiful wedding. I was thrilled for them, truly. I wanted nothing more than for my son to find love and happiness. I even offered to help with the wedding expenses, knowing how much a grand celebration meant to Emily. I had accumulated a significant amount in my savings, nearly $120,000, from years of careful budgeting and investing the remainder of David's life insurance policy. I had always envisioned using it for my retirement, for a comfortable, worry-free old age. But seeing Michael's excitement, Emily's dazzling smile, I felt a surge of maternal generosity. What mother wouldn't want to contribute to her son's happiness? I remember one specific conversation, about 18 months before the wedding, in April of 2024. Michael called me, his voice tinged with a mix of excitement and stress. "Mom, Emily really wants a dream wedding, something grand, you know? Her parents are contributing a lot, but it's still so much. We're looking at venues and they're just astronomical." He paused, and I could almost hear the unspoken question. "We found this incredible place, the Grand Manor, but it's going to be at least $70,000 just for the venue and catering." My heart fluttered. $70,000 was a huge sum. But then I thought of Michael, of his happiness, of the life David and I had always wanted for him. I told him, "Michael, don't you worry about it. I have some savings. I want to help. This is your special day." I ended up transferring $50,000 to a joint account we set up for wedding expenses, an account I was the sole primary holder of, with Michael as an authorized user. I thought it was a practical way to manage the funds, to ensure everything was paid correctly. I also had a separate $40,000 from David's life insurance that was specifically designated for Michael's future, held in a trust that I managed. I decided to use that as well, believing it was for his ultimate happiness. In total, I contributed $90,000 of my life savings to their wedding. $90,000. It was a staggering amount, nearly 75% of my entire retirement fund. But it was for Michael. It was for his happiness. It was for a day I believed would solidify our family, a day of joy and celebration. I genuinely believed I was investing in his future, in our family's future. Was I naive to think that? The planning continued, and I was often consulted, asked for my opinion on flowers, on the menu, on the guest list. I felt involved, valued. Emily would call me, sometimes even twice a week, to discuss details, and I cherished those conversations. I felt like I was truly a part of their journey, a vital contributor to their dream. I even helped them choose the wedding photographer, a talented artist named Sarah Jenkins, whose package alone cost $8,000. I remember thinking how wonderful it was that we were all working together. But I didn't realize when things started to change. I truly believed I was investing in their future, in our family's future. I genuinely thought my contribution of $90,000 was a testament to my love, a foundation for their happiness. But looking back now, with the clarity that only hindsight can provide, I see the subtle shifts, the almost imperceptible cracks that began to form in our relationship. I didn't realize when things started to change, when the warmth began to cool, when the respect started to erode. I was so caught up in the dream of their perfect wedding, in the joy I imagined it would bring, that I overlooked the warning signs, the red flags waving gently in the wind. The first incident, a small tremor that I dismissed as wedding stress, happened in late May of 2024, about 5 months after I made the initial large transfer. Michael and Emily were visiting for a weekend, and I had prepared a special dinner, all of Michael's favorite dishes, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and my famous green bean casserole. The house smelled wonderful, a comforting mix of herbs and home cooking. I had even bought a new tablecloth, a cheerful floral pattern to make the evening feel festive. Emily, however, barely touched her food. She picked at it, pushing the green beans around her plate. "Oh, Helen," she said, her voice a little too sweet, a little too loud. "This is quaint, so very homey. But Michael and I are trying to eat a bit lighter, for the wedding. And we usually prefer organic, locally sourced ingredients. Well, it's a bit heavy, isn't it?" Michael just sat there, silent, his eyes fixed on his plate, not meeting my gaze. My heart sank a little, a tiny pinprick of disappointment. I remember feeling a flush of embarrassment, a warmth spreading across my face. I quickly tried to brush it off, saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry, dear. I just wanted to make Michael's favorites. Next time I'll be sure to ask about your preferences." I justified it by telling myself she was just particular, perhaps a little stressed about the wedding. It was nothing personal, right? A few weeks later, in mid-June, I called Michael to discuss some details about the florist. I had found a wonderful local vendor who offered beautiful arrangements at a much more reasonable price than the one Emily had initially chosen, potentially saving us $3,000. I was excited to share the news, thinking I was being helpful. "Michael, I found this amazing florist, Pedal Pushers. Their hydrangeas are exquisite, and they're offering a package that's almost 20% cheaper than blooms and bouquets." I gushed, my voice full of enthusiasm. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Michael sighed, a heavy, exasperated sound. "Mom, please. Emily has her heart set on blooms and bouquets. Their aesthetic is just different, more sophisticated. We've already discussed this. Can you just let us handle it? You're making things more complicated." His tone was sharp, dismissive. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. My enthusiasm evaporated, replaced by a sting of hurt. I mumbled an apology, my voice barely a whisper, and hung up. I told myself he was just overwhelmed, that wedding planning was stressful for everyone. He didn't mean to be rude. Did he? Then came the incident with the wedding invitations in early July. Emily had sent me a proof of the invitations, elegant cream cards with gold foil lettering. I noticed a small typo in the address of the reception venue. It was a minor error, easily corrected, but important. I called Emily, thinking she'd appreciate the catch. "Emily, darling, the invitations are absolutely beautiful. Just one tiny thing. The street number for the Grand Manor is listed as 123 Main Street, but it's actually 1230 Main Street. Just a quick fix," I said, trying to be helpful. Her response was immediate and icy. "Helen, are you serious? You're scrutinizing every single detail? It's a small mistake, easily overlooked. We've already sent them to the printer. Now we'll have to pay for a reprint, all because you decided to play editor. Can't you just trust us?" Her voice was tight with annoyance. I could almost feel her glare through the phone. I stammered, trying to explain, but she cut me off. "Just leave it, Helen. We'll figure it out." I felt a wave of shame wash over me. I had only tried to help, to prevent a bigger problem. Why was she so angry? I convinced myself that she was just under immense pressure, that I had inadvertently added to her stress. It was a big day after all. Around this time, I started confiding in my dear friend, Susan Peterson, a retired schoolteacher who lived 2 streets over. We'd known each other for over 40 years, since our children were in kindergarten. We often met for coffee at the local diner, The Daily Grind, every Tuesday morning at 9:30 a.m. One morning in late July, I recounted the invitation incident, my voice laced with a tremor of doubt. "Susan, I just don't understand. I was only trying to help, but Emily made me feel like I was deliberately sabotaging things. And Michael, he just stood by." Susan, a woman with a kind face and sharp wit, listened patiently, stirring her coffee. She looked at me, her gaze steady. "Helen, honey, I've seen this before. When people get caught up in the glitz and glamour, sometimes they forget where they came from. And sometimes, when a new person comes into the picture, Loyalties can shift. Are you sure they're treating you with the respect you deserve? You've given them so much. Her words, though gentle, pricked at a raw nerve. I brushed them off, though, saying, "Oh, Susan, you're just being protective. It's just wedding stress. They're young. They're in love. It'll all blow over." I didn't want to believe her. I couldn't. Another incident that should have been a glaring red flag occurred in early August. Michael called, asking for another $5,000 for a last-minute upgrade to the wedding band. "Mom, the band we booked, the Rhythm Kings, they're good, but the Velvet Grooves just became available, and they're incredible. Emily really wants them. It's an extra $5,000, but it would make the reception so much more memorable." He sounded so eager, so hopeful. I hesitated. My savings were dwindling rapidly. I had already given so much. But then I heard Emily's voice in the background, a faint, sweet whisper. "Oh, Michael, your mom is so generous. I'm sure she wants us to have the best." That subtle manipulation, that gentle nudge, worked. I felt a familiar pang of guilt, a desire to please them, to ensure their happiness. I transferred the $5,000 that very afternoon. I told myself it was the last big expense, that it was for a good cause. It was for Michael's happiness, wasn't it? I didn't want to be the one to deny him something he clearly wanted so badly. I was still clinging to the idea that my sacrifices were appreciated, that they saw my efforts. A week later, in mid-August, I had a conversation with my sister, Carol, who lived in Florida, but we spoke on the phone every Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. I mentioned the latest request for funds, trying to make light of it. "Can you believe it, Carol? Another $5,000 for a band upgrade. These weddings are just money pits." I chuckled, but there was a tremor in my voice. Carol, always more direct than Susan, didn't mince words. "Helen, are you absolutely sure this is what you want? You've given them almost $90,000. That's your retirement, your security. Are they even acknowledging your generosity? Are they treating you with respect? Because from what you're telling me, it sounds like they're taking advantage of your good nature. You need to set some boundaries, honey." Her words were a stark warning, a splash of cold water. I felt a flicker of annoyance, a defensive urge to protect Michael and Emily. "Oh, Carol, you're exaggerating. They're just excited. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event, and Michael is my son. I want to help him." I quickly changed the subject, unwilling to confront the uncomfortable truth her words implied. I didn't want to see it. I couldn't. Another unsettling moment, which I now see as a clear precursor, occurred in late August, just 6 weeks before the wedding. Michael and Emily had sent out a revised guest list, and I noticed that several of my longtime friends, women I had known for decades and who had watched Michael grow up, were no longer on it. I called Michael, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. "Michael, I just looked at the updated guest list. Mrs. Henderson, the Bakers, even Aunt Martha. They're not on it anymore." "What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. He sighed, a familiar sound of impatience. "Mom, Emily and I had to make some tough cuts. The venue has a strict capacity of 250 guests, and we needed to prioritize. Emily's family has a lot of important business contacts, and frankly, some of your friends, well, they just don't fit the vibe we're going for. It's nothing personal." His words felt like a cold slap. Aunt Martha, my sister's own sister, was deemed not to fit the vibe? I felt a deep pang of hurt, a sense of being erased from his life, piece by piece. I tried to argue to explain how much these people meant to me, but he cut me off saying, "Mom, it's done. Please don't make a fuss. It's our wedding." I hung up, feeling a profound sense of isolation. I told myself it was just practicalities, that weddings are expensive and guest lists are always tricky. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was a deliberate distancing, a quiet exclusion. The final, most blatant sign I chose to ignore happened in early September, just a month before the wedding. Emily had organized a bridal shower at a fancy restaurant in the city, and I was, of course, invited. I bought a new dress for the occasion, a lovely floral print that I thought was quite elegant. When I arrived, Emily greeted me with a strained smile. As we were mingling, she introduced me to some of her friends, a group of impeccably dressed women in their late 30s. "And this is Helen, Michael's mother," she said, her voice carrying a subtle, almost imperceptible tone of apology. Then, she added, with a dismissive wave of her hand towards my dress, "She's very traditional, always so practical." One of her friends, a woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a diamond necklace that sparkled under the restaurant lights, actually chuckled. I felt my face flush crimson. My hands, holding a small gift-wrapped box, trembled slightly. I forced a smile, trying to appear unaffected, but inside, a cold dread began to settle. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to scream. But I just stood there, paralyzed by the quiet humiliation. I told myself it was just Emily's way, that she was trying to fit in with her friends, that perhaps my dress wasn't as fashionable as I thought. I made excuses for her, for Michael's continued silence on these matters. I was still holding on to the image of the loving son and the grateful daughter-in-law. What I discovered later, however, would shatter that image completely. The subtle shifts, the ignored signs, they were merely precursors to a much darker, more painful reality. The weeks leading up to the wedding became a relentless barrage of emotional blows, each one chipping away at my dignity, my self-worth, and my relationship with my son. It was a slow, agonizing descent into a place I never imagined I'd be. One Tuesday morning, September 12th, 2024, just a month before the wedding, I received a call from Emily. Her voice, usually sweet and light, was now sharp, almost accusatory. "Helen, we just got the final invoice for the floral arrangements from Blooms and Bouquets. It's $12,000, and the deposit you paid, the $4,000, it's not enough. We need another $8,000 immediately. And honestly, Michael and I were discussing, your choice of florist for the initial deposit was a bit off-brand for our wedding. It almost caused a huge issue with the aesthetic we're going for." My stomach clenched. I had paid the deposit for the florist they chose, not the one I had suggested. I felt a wave of confusion, then a burning indignation. "Emily, I paid the deposit for Blooms and Bouquets exactly as you asked. I have the receipt right here, dated July 1st, for $4,000. What are you talking about?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but a tremor betrayed my rising anger. She scoffed. "Well, it's not showing up correctly on their end, and frankly, we don't have time for this. Just send the $8,000. We need to finalize this by tomorrow." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone, my hand shaking. I felt a cold dread creeping in. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about a deliberate distortion of facts, a blatant disregard for my contributions. I felt a knot of tears forming in my throat, but I swallowed them back. I couldn't cry. Not yet. A few days later, on September 15th, Michael called. He sounded distant, his voice devoid of the usual warmth. "Mom, Emily's parents are hosting a pre-wedding brunch next Saturday at their country club. It's a very exclusive event, just close family and a few key business associates. Emily thinks, she thinks it might be best if you didn't come. You know, with the dress code and everything, it's a very formal affair." My breath hitched. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Not invited to my own son's pre-wedding event? Because of my clothes? My mind flashed back to Emily's snide comment at the bridal shower. My face burned with shame, a deep internal blush that spread from my neck to my hairline. I could feel the tears welling up, hot and stinging, but I refused to let them fall. "Michael," I managed, my voice a thin, reedy whisper, "are you serious? I'm your mother. I've given you so much for this wedding." He cut me off, his voice hardening. "Mom, please don't make this difficult. It's just for one event. We'll see you at the rehearsal dinner." He hung up, leaving me with the dial tone buzzing in my ear, a sound as hollow as my heart. I sank onto the sofa, the floral pattern of the cushions blurring through my unshed tears. The silence in my small living room was deafening, amplifying the ache in my chest. I felt like a discarded piece of furniture, no longer useful, no longer wanted. The next week, on September 22nd, I decided to drive to the city to try and talk to Michael in person. I hoped that seeing me face to face would remind him of our bond, of all the years of love and sacrifice. I arrived at his apartment building, a sleek modern high-rise with a doorman, around 2:00 p.m. I called him from the lobby. "Michael, I'm downstairs. Can I come up? I really need to talk to you." There was a long pause. Then his voice, strained and annoyed, came through the phone. "Mom, I'm really busy right now. Emily and I are going over some last-minute wedding details." "Can't this wait?" I pleaded. "No, Michael, it can't. Please, just 5 minutes." He sighed, a sound of utter exasperation. "Fine, but make it quick." When I got to their apartment, Emily opened the door, her expression a mask of polite irritation. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair wrapped in a towel, as if I had interrupted something incredibly important. The apartment smelled faintly of expensive coffee and something sweet, like vanilla. Michael was sitting at a large glass table, surrounded by stacks of papers and a laptop. He didn't even look up. "Mom, what is it?" he asked, his tone flat. I looked at him, my heart aching. "Michael, what's happening to us? Why are you treating me like this? I've given you almost $90,000 for this wedding. I just want to be a part of your life, to celebrate with you." Emily interjected, her voice dripping with condescension. "Helen, we appreciate your contributions. But this wedding is our vision. And frankly, your constant interference is becoming a burden. We're trying to create a sophisticated, elegant event, and your simple tastes just don't align with that." My eyes welled up. I felt a hot flush of anger mixed with profound sadness. "My simple tastes? Emily, I paid for half of this wedding. I sacrificed my retirement for this." Michael finally looked up, his eyes narrowed. "Mom, that's enough. You're being dramatic. We're grateful, okay? But you need to understand, this is our day, not yours." The words, delivered with such cold finality, felt like a punch to the gut. I felt my legs tremble, my vision blurring with tears. I turned and walked out, the metallic taste of humiliation in my mouth. I didn't even say goodbye. I just left, the heavy apartment door closing behind me with a soft, definitive click, sealing me out. As I stood there, the heavy apartment door closing behind me, the polished chrome handle felt cold beneath my fingers. The hallway, usually bustling with residents, was eerily silent, amplifying the hollow ache in my chest. I could still hear Emily's condescending tone, Michael's cold finality, echoing in my ears. I remember looking at the expensive modern art on the walls, the sleek minimalist furniture in the lobby, and feeling utterly out of place, a relic from a different time. My simple cotton blouse, which I thought was perfectly respectable, suddenly felt threadbare and old. I pressed the elevator button, my fingers shaking, and watched the numbers light up, counting down the floors. Each descending floor felt like another step further away from the son I knew, from the life I had built for him. The air in the elevator was sterile, odorless, a stark contrast to the comforting smells of my own home. I clutched my worn leather purse, its familiar weight the only anchor in a world that felt suddenly alien and hostile. I walked out of the building into the bustling city street, the cacophony of car horns and distant sirens a jarring soundtrack to my shattered heart. I felt a profound sense of loss, a grief so deep it was almost physical. It wasn't just a visit, it was a desperate plea for connection, and it had been brutally rejected. The sun, usually a source of comfort, felt harsh and unforgiving on my face. I drove home in a daze, the familiar Ohio landscape blurring past my window. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile the loving son I raised with the cold, dismissive man he had become. I remembered a time, back in July of 1999, when Michael was 13. He had broken his arm falling off his skateboard. I rushed him to the emergency room, my heart in my throat. He was so scared, his face pale, but he clung to my hand, his grip tight. "Mom, don't leave me," he'd whispered, tears streaming down his face. I stayed by his side for 6 hours, holding his hand, comforting him until the cast was on and he was finally asleep. I remembered the relief, the fierce protectiveness I felt. Where was that boy now? Where was that connection? The next week, Ansuzern for the catering and venue rental was due immediately, and if not paid within 24 hours, the contract would be voided. My blood ran cold. I had already transferred the $50,000 for the venue and catering months ago directly into the joint account. I immediately called Michael. "Michael, I just got an email from the wedding planner. She says the catering payment is overdue. I transferred $50,000 for that back in April. What's going on?" His voice was tight, defensive. "Mom, calm down. There must be some mistake. I'll look into it." But his tone lacked conviction. I could hear Emily's voice in the background, a sharp whisper. "Tell her to just pay it, Michael. We don't have time for this." My heart pounded. A cold, hard suspicion began to form in my mind. Had they used that money for something else? Had they taken advantage of my trust? I felt a wave of nausea. The air in my small kitchen suddenly felt thin, suffocating. The email from Sarah Davies, the wedding planner, wasn't just about the $15,000 payment for catering and venue rental. It detailed a series of other smaller, but equally crucial, outstanding balances. The florist needed another $2,000 for upgraded centerpieces Emily had chosen last minute. The baker was demanding $1,500 for a custom-designed cake tier that was added without my knowledge. Even the string quartet, Elegance Ensemble, had an overdue balance of $750 for extended playing time. Each line item was a fresh stab, a new piece of evidence that my trust had been systematically abused. I reread the email 3 times, my eyes scanning the figures, trying to make sense of the chaos. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the meticulous records I kept with this blatant discrepancy. I felt a cold, creeping certainty that this wasn't just a mistake. It was a deliberate pattern. The air in my small kitchen, usually filled with the comforting scent of coffee, now felt thin, suffocating, heavy with the weight of their deception. I remember clutching the counter, my knuckles white as a wave of nausea washed over me. How could they be so careless, so brazen with my hard-earned money? The betrayal was a bitter taste in my mouth, a burning sensation behind my eyes that refused to turn into tears. A few days later, on October 2nd, I called Susan again, my voice trembling. "Susan, I don't know what to do. They're asking for more money, saying payments are overdue, but I know I paid them. I feel like I'm being gaslighted." Susan listened, her expression grim. "Helen, this isn't just wedding stress anymore. This is something else. You need to protect yourself. You've given them everything. You need to find out what's really going on." Her words, though alarming, resonated with a growing sense of unease within me. I was starting to see the pattern, the deliberate manipulation. The final straw, the moment everything truly collapsed, happened on October 10th, just 4 days before the wedding. I received a call from a representative of the insurance company that held David's life insurance policy. "Mrs. Miller, we're calling to confirm the beneficiary change request for Michael Miller's trust fund. It seems there was a request to liquidate a significant portion of the fund, approximately $40,000, and transfer it to a private account. We just need your final authorization as the trustee." My jaw dropped. The $40,000 from David's life insurance, the money I had specifically set aside for Michael's future, the money I had decided to use for the wedding, was being liquidated without my explicit knowledge or consent for this specific transfer. I had transferred it to the joint account, yes, but this was a separate, direct liquidation request. My mind raced. I had given them access to the joint account, but I was the sole primary holder. How could they do this? "What? No! I never authorized that specific liquidation. I am the trustee. I need to know who requested this." I practically screamed into the phone. The representative, sounding flustered, said, "The request came through with Michael Miller's signature, and it indicated your verbal consent, Mrs. Miller. We just need your final confirmation." My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the phone. Michael had forged my consent. He was trying to steal from his own trust fund, from his father's legacy. The betrayal was a physical ache, a searing pain in my chest. My vision blurred with hot, angry tears. I felt a profound sense of violation, of being utterly used and discarded. The air in my small living room, usually a sanctuary, now felt suffocating, filled with the ghosts of broken promises and shattered trust. It was in that moment, standing in my living room, the phone still clutched in my trembling hand, that something inside me snapped. The years of sacrifice, the ignored signs, the escalating disrespect, the blatant betrayal, it all coalesced into a single, burning resolve. I had been a mother, a provider, a supporter, but I was also Helen Miller, a woman who had worked hard, saved diligently, and deserved respect. I had given them my heart, my savings, my trust, and they had thrown it back in my face, trampled on it, and tried to steal what little I had left. The tears finally came, a torrent of grief and rage. But beneath them, a steel resolve began to form. I was done being the victim. I was done being the simple mother. I was done being silent. I would not let them get away with this. I would not let them ruin me. It was when I discovered something that would change everything. The call from the insurance company, the blatant attempt to liquidate Michael's trust fund without my explicit consent, was the final, undeniable proof. It wasn't just about disrespect or ingratitude anymore. It was about outright deception and financial manipulation. My heart, though bruised and aching, hardened with a new resolve. I was done being the passive, grieving mother. I was Helen Miller, a woman who had navigated life's toughest storms, and I wasn't about to let my own son and his fiancée strip me of my dignity and my financial security. The very next morning, October 11th, 2024, just 3 days before the wedding, I started my investigation. My first call was to the insurance company again, but this time I was armed with a clear head and a steely determination. I spoke to a supervisor, a woman named Ms. Albright, and calmly but firmly explained the situation. I emphasized that I was the sole trustee of Michael's life insurance trust, established by his father, David Miller, on May 1, 2004, with an initial value of $50,000, and that any liquidation or transfer required my explicit, written authorization. I specifically stated that I had not authorized the $40,000 liquidation request that had come through. Ms. Albright, after reviewing the file, confirmed that while a request with Michael's signature had been submitted, my final authorization as trustee was indeed pending. She assured me that no funds had been disbursed and that she would immediately flag the account, requiring my direct in-person verification for any future transactions. This was my first victory, a small but significant one. The $40,000 was safe, for now. Next, I turned my attention to the joint account I had set up for the wedding expenses. I had transferred a total of $50,000 into it, with Michael as an authorized user. I logged into my online banking portal, my fingers trembling slightly as I navigated through the transactions. What I saw made my blood run cold. Over the past 6 months, there had been numerous large withdrawals and transfers, none of which were directly related to wedding vendors. There was a $10,000 transfer to an account labeled Michael Miller Personal Savings on August 1st. Another $7,500 withdrawal in cash on September 10th, and a series of smaller but still significant payments to luxury boutiques and high-end restaurants, totaling nearly $15,000, all dated between July and September. It was clear. They hadn't just used the money for the wedding. They had been systematically siphoning off my contributions for their personal expenses, treating my life savings as their own private ATM. Of the $50,000 I had deposited, only about $12,000 remained, and those were mostly earmarked for final vendor payments. My heart ached with the depth of their betrayal, but a fierce anger now fueled my resolve. I immediately called my lawyer, Mr. Thomas Reynolds, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney I had used for my late husband's estate. I explained everything, detailing the $90,000 I had contributed, the fraudulent liquidation attempt, and the suspicious transactions in the joint account. Mr. Reynolds listened patiently, taking meticulous notes. "Helen," he said, his voice calm and reassuring, "you have a very strong case here. You are the primary account holder of the joint account, and as the trustee of Michael's trust, your authorization is paramount. We can immediately freeze the joint account and issue stop payment orders for any outstanding checks or transfers. We can also notify the wedding vendors that you are the primary payer and that any further payments or changes must go through you." He outlined a clear, actionable plan. The legal terms, the percentages, the deadlines. It all started to make sense. He estimated that with the contracts and transfer proofs I had, we could recover a significant portion of the misused funds, potentially up to 80% of the non-wedding related expenses. A wave of relief, mixed with a potent sense of empowerment, washed over me. The vulnerability I had felt for so long began to recede, replaced by a quiet strength. I was no longer the helpless victim. I was Helen Miller, and I was taking back control. Mr. Reynolds advised me to gather all my documentation, bank statements, transfer confirmations, vendor contracts, and any communication I had with Michael and Emily regarding the wedding finances. I spent the rest of that day, October 11th, meticulously organizing every single piece of paper, every email, every text message. Each document was a piece of the puzzle, building an undeniable case. I knew I had to act swiftly and decisively. The clock was ticking, but for the first time in months, I felt a surge of adrenaline, not fear. I was no longer just a mother. I was a strategist, preparing for a battle I never wanted to fight, but one I was now determined to win. The clock was ticking, but for the first time in months, I felt a surge of adrenaline, not fear. I was no longer just a mother. I was a strategist, preparing for a battle I never wanted to fight, but one I was now determined to win. The next day, Friday, October 12th, was a whirlwind of activity. I was on the phone constantly, my voice firm and clear. My first call was to the bank. Following Mr. Reynolds' advice, I initiated a freeze on the joint wedding account, effectively stopping any further unauthorized transactions. The bank representative confirmed the freeze would be immediate and irreversible without my explicit consent. This secured the remaining $12,000. Then, I contacted each of the major wedding vendors directly: the Grand Manor, venue and catering, Blooms and Bouquets, florist, Sarah Jenkins, photographer, and the Velvet Grooves, band. I explained that I was the primary payer for their services, providing them with copies of my transfer confirmations and the contracts I had signed or co-signed. I informed them that any outstanding payments or future communications regarding the wedding finances were to be directed solely to me, Helen Miller, and that any instructions from Michael or Emily regarding cancellations or changes were to be disregarded unless confirmed by me. The wedding planner, Sarah Davies, was particularly surprised. "Mrs. Miller, I had no idea," she said, her voice laced with genuine concern. "Michael and Emily have been handling most of the payments directly. I'll make sure all future communications go through you." It was a small but crucial victory. I was systematically dismantling their control piece by piece. 30 hours before the wedding, the calls started. Michael called first, his voice laced with a frantic edge I hadn't heard in years. "Mom, what did you do? The bank just froze the wedding account. And the caterer just called, saying they can't process our final payment. What is going on?" His tone was a mix of confusion and anger, but beneath it, I detected a tremor of fear. "Michael," I said, my voice calm, steady, "I did what I had to do. I am the primary account holder, and I discovered unauthorized transactions. I also found out you tried to liquidate your trust fund without my consent. I've taken steps to protect my finances and your father's legacy." There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then Emily's voice, shrill and furious, cut in. "Helen, you manipulative old woman! How dare you? Do you know what you're doing? You're ruining our wedding. You're ruining everything." I could hear her screaming in the background, her voice rising in pitch. Michael quickly took the phone back. "Mom, please, this is insane. We can fix this. Just unfreeze the account. We need that money for the final payments. The wedding is tomorrow. His tone had shifted from anger to desperation. The power dynamic had irrevocably changed. 20 hours before the wedding, Emily's mother, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, a formidable woman with significant social standing, called me. Her voice, usually imperious, was now surprisingly polite, almost pleading. "Helen, I understand there's been some misunderstanding regarding the wedding finances. Emily is distraught. Michael is beside himself. Can we not resolve this amicably? This is a very important day for our families." I listened patiently, then calmly explained the situation, detailing the $90,000 I had contributed, the unauthorized withdrawals, and the attempted trust fund liquidation. I emphasized that I had acted only to protect my financial security and my son's inheritance. There was a long pause. I see," she finally said, her voice considerably softer. "This is much more complicated than I was led to believe. Perhaps we can discuss this further after the wedding." Her tone had completely changed. The rich, powerful mother-in-law, who had previously treated me with barely concealed disdain, was now treading carefully. 10 hours before the wedding, Michael called again, his voice cracking. "Mom, please. The band just called. They haven't received their final payment. They're threatening to pull out. Emily is crying. Her parents are furious. This is a disaster. What do you want? Just tell me what you want." His desperation was palpable. "Michael," I replied, my voice firm, "I want accountability. I want respect. And I want to ensure that the money I contributed is used for its intended purpose, not for your personal luxuries. I will ensure the vendors are paid, but on my terms." 3 hours before the wedding, the final calls came. Michael, Emily, and even Mrs. Vance, all calling, texting, leaving voicemails, their voices a mix of panic, anger, and desperate pleas. The carefully constructed facade of their perfect wedding was crumbling, and they were scrambling to pick up the pieces. And then it was Saturday, October 14th, 2023, the wedding day. I arrived at the Grand Manor, dressed in my simple navy blue silk dress, exactly as I described in the beginning. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and champagne. I walked towards the grand ballroom entrance, my heart a drum in my chest, but my resolve unshakable. That's when Michael stepped in front of me, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. Emily hovered behind him, her beautiful white dress a stark contrast to her furious expression. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice low, laced with venom. "I told you to wait. You're causing a scene. Emily is already upset. You're embarrassing her." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Look at you. Your dress. It's just not appropriate. You're making us look bad. You're going to ruin everything." My legs felt like jelly, my vision blurred, but this time it wasn't from shame. It was from a cold, controlled fury. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the festive background noise. "Michael, I am here because I paid for this wedding. Every single vendor, every single flower, every single plate of food in that ballroom, I am the one who made it possible. And you, my son, have the audacity to tell me I'm not welcome, to tell me I'm an embarrassment." Emily stepped forward, her face contorted with rage. "You old hag, you think you can just waltz in here and ruin everything? We don't need your charity. We don't need your money." I turned to her, my gaze unwavering. "Oh, but you did, Emily. You needed my $90,000. You needed my signature on those contracts. And what you didn't realize is that I, Helen Miller, am the one who holds the power here." I pulled out my phone, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, and sent a pre-written message. "I just canceled the final payment for the catering and the band, and I've instructed the venue to halt all services until further notice. Unless I personally authorize it, this wedding, your dream wedding, is over." Michael's face went ashen. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The music inside the ballroom seemed to falter, a sudden, jarring silence. I watched as their perfect world crumbled before their eyes. Mrs. Vance, Emily's mother, who had just emerged from the ballroom, saw the scene unfold. Her eyes widened in horror as she heard my words. The rich, powerful in-laws who had looked down on me now stared in stunned disbelief. The tables had turned. I still wonder if I did the right thing. And you, what would you have done in my place? The silence that followed my words was deafening, broken only by the faint, distant strains of the jazz band from inside the ballroom. Michael and Emily stood frozen, their faces a mixture of shock and utter disbelief. Mrs. Vance, Emily's mother, looked from me to her daughter, her carefully composed facade crumbling. I watched as the realization dawned on them, the full weight of my actions settling in. I had pulled the rug out from under their feet, not out of malice, but out of a desperate need for self-preservation and justice. I had paid for this wedding, and they had tried to erase me from it. That was a line I simply could not allow them to cross. I stood there for a moment longer, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. Then I turned and walked away, leaving them in the opulent entrance hall, their dream wedding teetering on the brink of collapse. I didn't look back. The air outside was cool, a welcome contrast to the suffocating heat of the ballroom. I got into my car, my hands still trembling, but my heart, for the first time in a long time, felt a sense of quiet triumph. What happened next was a flurry of frantic phone calls and desperate negotiations. Michael and Emily, faced with a wedding that was rapidly unraveling, had no choice but to confront the reality of their situation. Mrs. Vance, realizing the extent of my financial involvement and the legal implications of their actions, quickly became an unexpected ally. She understood the power of a contract and the importance of reputation. She intervened, not out of love for me, but out of a desire to salvage her daughter's wedding and her family's standing. Within hours, my lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, was in direct communication with Michael and Emily's legal representation, facilitated by Mrs. Vance. The negotiations were swift and decisive. The $40,000 from Michael's trust fund, which he had attempted to liquidate, was immediately secured and placed under my sole control as trustee, with strict new conditions for any future disbursements. The $38,000 that Michael and Emily had siphoned from the joint wedding account for their personal expenses was to be repaid to me in full, with a structured payment plan over the next 12 months, secured by a lien on a property Emily owned. Furthermore, all remaining wedding payments were to be handled directly by me, ensuring that the vendors I had initially contracted were paid, and the wedding could proceed, albeit under my watchful eye. The wedding, in the end, did happen, but it was far from the joyous, carefree celebration they had envisioned. It was a day overshadowed by tension, by the unspoken knowledge of what had transpired. Months have passed since that day. Michael eventually reached out, his voice filled with genuine remorse. He apologized, not just for his actions at the wedding, but for the years of neglect and disrespect. He admitted that Emily's influence had clouded his judgment, but he took full responsibility for his own choices. Emily, on the other hand, never truly apologized. Our interactions remained strained, formal, and minimal. My relationship with Michael is slowly, cautiously being rebuilt. It's not the same as it once was, and perhaps it never will be. The warmth, the unconditional trust, has been replaced by a colder, more respectful distance. I help him when he truly needs it, but under very clear, defined conditions. I've learned to set boundaries, to protect my own well-being, and to prioritize my peace of mind. I still see him, we have dinner once a month, but the dynamic has fundamentally shifted. He now understands the value of my sacrifices and the consequences of taking them for granted. The path to this new, more defined relationship wasn't easy. There were awkward silences during our monthly dinners, moments where I caught myself wanting to offer unsolicited advice, or he would instinctively try to revert to old patterns of expecting without asking. But each time, I gently redirected, and he, to his credit, learned to respect the new boundaries. We talk about his work, about general life events, but the deep, intimate sharing we once had is gone. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of the old Michael, a flash of his boyish grin, or a thoughtful comment, and my heart aches with a bittersweet longing for what was lost. But then I remind myself of the strength I found, the self-respect I reclaimed. It's a constant dance, a delicate balance between love and self-preservation. I've even started taking a pottery class, something I always wanted to do but never made time for. It's a small thing, but it's my thing, a symbol of my renewed focus on my own happiness and interests. I've learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is also an act of self-love, and that true family respect is earned, not simply given by birthright. Looking back, I've learned so many invaluable lessons. First, never sacrifice your entire financial security for anyone, no matter how much you love them. Your future matters. Second, trust your instincts. Those nagging feelings, those ignored signs, they are often your inner wisdom trying to warn you. Third, setting boundaries is not selfish. It's an act of self-love and respect. Fourth, true love and respect are not transactional. They are freely given and reciprocated. Fifth, standing up for yourself, even against those you love, is sometimes the only way to reclaim your dignity. Sixth, forgiveness is a journey, not a destination, and it starts with self-compassion. And finally, your worth is not determined by how much you give, but by who you are. If you're listening to my story and find yourself in a similar situation, feeling taken for granted, feeling like your generosity is being exploited, please know that you are not alone. It's never too late to reclaim your power, to set those boundaries, and to demand the respect you deserve. Your story matters. Your well-being matters. Did I do the right thing? And you, what would you have done? Leave your like so I know this story touched you, and subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow I'll be bringing another story that marked my life. Tell me in the comments what you think.